Welcome to BODS Mayhem Hour, your source for all hard rock, heavy metal, new metal, alternative, punk, horror punk, hardcore, rock, and all local bands, with your host, John the Bod, a.k.a. the Bodfather.
Hello, this is your friend and humble narrator, rock and roll radio raconteur, Lou Brutus, and you are listening to BODS Mayhem Hour. May the rock gods have mercy on your dark, dark soul.
The views and opinions of the guest do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of BODS Mayhem Radio Network, its staff, affiliates, or sponsors. Parental discretion is advised. Welcome to BODS Mayhem Radio Network.
Hey everybody, welcome to BODS Mayhem Hour. I'm your host, John the Bod, a.k.a. the Bodfather, and as always, I bring you guys and gals awesome interviews. Today, it's an honor and a very huge privilege to have Mr. Lou Brutus on the show, and he's working with Rare Bird Books, and they are set to release Lou's Memoir Sonic Warrior My Life as a Rock and Roll Reprobate, I should say, in spring of 2020. Yeah. Also, Lou is a photographer, collector, rock historian, and Lou Brutus Hard Drive Show has been roundly lauded by industry, quoted by press, and honored by award shows like for over 23 years. That speaks a lot right there, folks. And Lou has spent over 19 years with SiriusXM as a host, interviewer, and senior programmer. He was nominated for the Billboard Airplay Monitor Awards for 6 consecutive years from 1996 to 2002, and has won 2 FMQB awards. And also, too, about this book, and I quote, this is per Lou, and I quote, "The time our tour bus ran over a guy on the New Jersey Turnpike, the time Snoop Dogg got me so high I drooled in my own lap, I cannot wait to read this. And the time I went to the Arctic and got in a mosh pit with a bunch of kids in polar bear fur while Metallica sang about sodomizing a goat. That is very true. The foreword is written by Lou's friend Corey Taylor, of course, of Slipknot and Stone Sour. Plus, there will be an original illustration for each chapter by his longtime partner in artistic friend in crime, Alan McBain. So we're going to be talking to Lou about all this. And Lou already blamed me for all kinds of stuff earlier. So Lou, how's it going, man?
Going pretty good. Yeah, listening to all that, I wonder, when the fuck do I sleep? But yeah, it's I'm excited to have the book on the way. It's I've written it over the course of the last maybe 4 or 5 years. But as you mentioned, I work a lot and I have a lot of projects, and the book was always something that I wanted to get out, but I had to find the time, and then I had to find a publisher, and that dance goes on for a while. But I'm glad to have landed with Rare Bird. They're doing pre-orders now too. You can pre-order the book at both or at either Amazon or Target. But the best place to get it is from rarebirdbooks.com, because those will be autographed first editions. Those will be special signed editions of the book. And, you mentioned some of the chapter names. Basically, the book is a memoir, and each chapter is a standalone story from a different time. And it sort of time hops around through my life to different rock and roll adventures I've had. And the opening chapter sort of, tells a story about me growing up in Englishtown, New Jersey, right in between New York and Philly. The name of that chapter is The Time I Attended My First Concert and Threw Up on Carlos Sanchez. and Carlos is my sister's boyfriend at the time, and I talked them into bringing me to see Black Sabbath and Ted Nugent at Madison Square Garden, December 6, 1976. Frank Zappa was the MC that night. He was a friend of Tony Iommi's at the time, and a big Black Sabbath fan, and wanted to come out and see them play. Frank later said he expected to be invited out on stage to play that night, but it never materialized, at least the performance part. But now on my end of the night, I was really sick. I had the flu and probably shouldn't have gone, but there was no way I was going to miss my first concert. But then, to make matters worse, when I got there, I got all excited by the, being at Madison Square Garden, and it's my first concert, so I thought it would be a good idea to down an entire bottle of Boone's Farm strawberry wine in one throw, which made me pass out. I missed the show, and to make a long story short, I go into vivid graphic detail in the book, but I power vomited over a very large portion of Madison Square Garden that night, and was not the only one, because, it was December of '76, and that's just how concerts went back then. So that's the opening chapter, and, a couple others that you mentioned, the time Snoop Dogg got me so high I drooled in my own lap. That was from the Project Revolution tour several years ago. That took place in Camden, New Jersey, his particular adventure with Snoop. And the Metallica chapter was... that was on me going up to the Arctic with them, a town called Tuktoyaktuk, which, if you can find it on the maps, go to the northern coast of mainland Canada, look slightly to the west, and at the mouth of the Mackenzie River, you'll see a tiny little Inuit village. By the way, the term Eskimo, not cool. Inuit are the native people up there. And this little village was a crossroads that didn't go anywhere. You couldn't drive up there. And Molson Beer picked it as a party. And they hired, at great expense, Metallica to play this thing. And there were a few hundred contest winners and me and the people who lived in the town. The band invited me up. The bill for the show was Metallica, Courtney Love's band Hole, Veruca Salt, and a great Canadian band. The only time I ever got to see them, Moist. And they played on the edge of the world. And this was the Labor Day weekend. It was already snowing up there. And because you're so far north, you're not only up in the Arctic, you're above the tree line. And when you're above the tree line, that means nothing grows higher than your kneecap. It's just like shrubs and like little grasses and stuff, and that's it. And the wind always blows, and it was just a wild place for a show. Again, I've been to over 3,000 concerts. I've been to over 3,000 music events.
Jeez.
And that may have been the coolest thing that I ever attended. And I mean, I can talk more if you want. There's many other chapters in the book, and many other of these crazy-ass rock and roll adventures. Oh, and the bus. You mentioned the bus, right?
Yeah.
That was traveling with Stone Sour. I had done because what I'll do as part of the radio show is I'll go out and travel with the bands that I know really well. Because some of these groups I have relationships with, for decades now. For example, I was in Maryland last night with Godsmack. That's a band I've been playing on the radio nationally since they were a band, so a little over 20 years. I'm going to hop on the road with them again for the beginning and the very end of the tour they're doing with Hailstorm opening up. So it's fun to travel with bands, but I always equate it to camping. It's fun for 3 or 4 days, and after that you want to get the fuck off the road because I don't know how people do it. But the New Jersey Turnpike story, I was a couple hours away from hopping off a tour with Stone Sour. They were going to drop me off at my office in Washington, D.C., and we hit a guy, and he ended up being okay. If he had been hurt bad or killed, I wouldn't have put it in the book. But it turned out about as well as a story can go, where you hit a guy in the New Jersey Turnpike. So it's in the book. And again, there are so many other stories in there, and so many other crazy things that have happened through this. Because I'm doing this stuff for 40 years,
Yeah.
And with very, very few exceptions, have met and interviewed and seen everybody that you could ever want to see. So, yeah, I'm excited for it to finally hit.
That's insane. I mean, I can't wait to read this because I know that you're going to have some great, crazy stories in this book. That's for sure.
Yeah. It's and listen, anybody who's around this shit as long as I've been, and again, I'm doing this since I'm a little kid, you're going to come up with crazy stories. And, I just happen to have, gotten a book deal for mine. So, that makes it fun. And I'm glad I finally got the book written. Again, as I said before, I'd been working on it for years, and I wasn't exactly putting the pedal to the metal to get it done. And actually, it was Corey Taylor, whom you mentioned, has written the foreword for me. He was one of the people who got on my ass and was like, well, finish the fucking book already. I want to read the book. Finish the book. And I said, well, I'm going to put in the stories I want to put in. And he was like, you asshole, you write a second book. Get this one out. You got more, write another one. Somebody else who, actually I'll mention two other friends who are also both rockers and writers. One is Joe Astrike, who has played for many years in a great band out of Columbus, Ohio called Watershed. He also is one of the people who formed one of the kind of crazy-ass bands I'm in called the Dead Schembecklers. But Joe was really instrumental in helping get me on the right track to write the book. And also my friend Ken Sharp, who's a musician, primarily an author, and he's written some great music-related books, including a book on the Wrecking Crew, the aggregate of L.A. studio musicians in the late 60s and early 70s who played on hundreds, maybe thousands of hits. He also wrote a great book on Cheap Trick. He co-wrote the biography with Eric Carmen of the Raspberries, and he's another guy I've known for decades who was on me to write the book and gave me some good advice for dealing with publishers and lit agents, because it's bad enough I got to deal with all the crazy rock and roll shit. Then you deal with crazy book shit. So it's I'm just glad that portion of it is done, and I'm moving on to the fun part of getting the book finished and published next year, and fully intending on a book tour. There are going to be some other crazy things I don't want to go into deets yet. We're going to do to promote the book, and it should be a lot of fun. And again, I think the book, for as crazy as it sounds, there's nothing in there that makes anybody else really look bad. I could have easily written a book about like all the drugs I've seen people do, but I don't want to be an asshole.
Right.
If people do that stuff, that's their business. I'm not writing some pissant tell-all book. If anybody looks bad in the chapters, it's me, from all the stupidity that I've done through the years. There's another chapter in the book called The Time I Threw Up on 100,000 People at the Biggest Music Event in History. And the entire chapter is about Live Aid, which I covered. I had just started professionally. I was working for WMMR in Philadelphia, which, to those unfamiliar, WMMR was one of the original FM rock radio stations on the planet. They were one of the first stations to go to a rock format on the FM band, and they're still doing it. They're the last ones left of the originals. And I had the good fortune of doing a college internship there, almost accidentally getting hired onto the staff, and then making it onto the air staff almost equally accidentally. Anyway, I was there for Live Aid, and my first job, because I was the youngest and stupidest, I was the one they sent up in the glass-nosed helicopter to fly over JFK Stadium where the show was happening. And on the first run, because my stomach was not used to moving sideways, which is what helicopters do besides the up and down, I barfed out of the window, and it rained down on. Now, I'm hoping, because it certainly dissipated by the time it got to the ground, so I'm hoping on what was a very hot, humid day, my vomit actually felt as a cool, refreshing rain on the faces of the hot concert goers down there, and that it didn't smell like my coffee and my eggs from that morning. But there's no way we'll really know, is there? So I prefer to put the better spin on it.
Oh, man. Oh, geez. That's awesome. I hate it for the concert goers.
Can you believe they gave me a book deal for this shit?
That's crazy. I know.
Like,
they need to rethink this. I think we need to have another vote. How's it been working with For the Wind Media and Rare Bird Books so far, man?
So far so good. For the Wind Media is the publicity company run by Jamie Roberts. I've known Jamie forever. She worked for many years as the publicist person for Roadrunner Records. She's worked on a ton of great projects. She's one of the best people in the industry. And I don't know shit about promoting books. Like, I know how to talk on the radio, and I know how to interview rock stars, and, I know a little bit about photography, but I don't know how, to publicize something of my own. So having a great relationship with Jamie, I thought it was a good thing to bring her in and work on that. And the Rare Bird people have been great so far. We're very early in the process of getting the book out. The book, will be published on April 14th, 2020. The reason really that we're talking about it as early as we are is, I had a number of festival appearances, including Rockfest in Cadott, Wisconsin, where I was just this last weekend, where I'm in front of tens of thousands of people every day. I'm stage host, photographer, and I'm also interviewing everybody, both for the Jumbotrons and for Hard Drive and Hard Drive XL, my two syndicated shows. So I figured it would be good to talk about the book there. So we kind of moved up by a couple of months the timetable for talking about the book. But we decided, well, if we're going to talk about it, we may as well take the pre-order. So again, they set up the page at rarebirdbooks.com, and apparently it's going really good, which surprises me because, even having not actively promoted it a lot yet, and just a few mentions on the air and some mentions at the show and a couple of things online, there's no concerted effort. The publisher hasn't done anything yet, nor should they. But the reaction has been great, and probably the most common reaction I'm getting is the reaction you're giving me, which is like, holy shit, I can't believe these are true stories. But, but it all happened. That's the thing. There's a pretty nutty chapter in there about the first time I met and then stayed in touch with the late, great Hunter S. Thompson, the writer who wrote Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas and The Great Shark Hunt. And, the story of meeting with Hunter involves a cattle prod and a bottle of Chivas Regal. Oh, no. And, it's one of the longer and more involved chapters because it goes into the first evening and why he took a liking to me, which was he accidentally liked me because he thought I had balls of steel. And again, it's in the chapter. I don't want to give too much away. But we kept in touch after that. I saw him again, and we kept in touch for years after that until he unfortunately took his own life, and that was a pretty horrible day. And I miss the guy every day. It's certainly, some of my favorite people growing up, and all of whom I got to work with or interview or work on projects with through the years. We could use all those guys now, being Hunter S. Thompson, the writer, George Carlin, the comedian, and another great rocker, Warren Zevon, who is a phenomenal songwriter, a very deep, rather dark dude, but he had a very good take on how the world worked, as did all those guys. So I was, proud to know each one of them. So that's that's one of the more interesting things about my job. I mean, I'm doing this for a long time, and at a national level for close to a quarter of a century, I've gotten to meet so many people I'm not only a fan of, but all of these interesting people. There are, and you'll understand this from doing your show. The business is filled not only with great artists, but there are interesting people who work on the record side, and who are engineers, and who are sound people, and there are guitar techs. Like, the entire business is filled with really colorful, interesting, talented characters. Yeah. And the more you learn about them, the better. And that's another good thing about the book. There, a lot of these folks that you might not have ever heard of, and maybe won't hear of again, sort of pop up as characters in the book just because they were there at that particular moment that I'm trying to capture with the stories. So, it's been fun writing, and almost certainly I definitely intend on writing a second book of the stories, and I'm also looking at hopefully doing a large format coffee table book of all the memorabilia I've collected. Because again, I've been to over 3,000 concerts. I've kept literally every single ticket stub, sticky backstage pass, laminate. I've got over 1,000 guitar picks. I've got over 1,500 posters. I have hundreds of set lists. I have stage guitars from bands like Slipknot and Kiss and Avenged Sevenfold and everything I have, posters, albums, CD, everything is covered in signatures. Now it's all in storage units all over the place.
Yeah.
But I want to put all of that into a book. And the tentative title for that one is One Man, 3,000 Concerts, the greatest collection of rock and roll shit ever assembled.
Yes, sir.
And, there might be a little bit of text for each thing in the book, but it really would not be a lot to read. It would mostly be just all of this stuff that I've got going back to my first show in 1976. So I don't know. What do you think? You think that'd be a decent book?
Yeah, that would be awesome to have something like that, because I personally would like to see what's in your collection. Because when I get to go out and cover these shows and do interviews and things, just a handshake is cool with me to get to meet the people that's made a big difference in my life, But if they're willing to sign something or give me a pick, I'm happy with that. So, yeah, I would love to see something like that.
Yeah, there was early years where I just thought, oh, I'm not going to bother to get anything signed. And I feel stupid about it now, because at that point, and again, now I was just a kid, but I was getting to be around, huge bands like Iron Maiden and Pink Floyd and Genesis and, bands that either aren't around anymore or are their visits are few and far between. And, I think it would have been cool to have stuff. What I find with, and I always arrange before I walk into somebody, I'll let the management know, or who's ever set up the interview, that, hey, I'm bringing 2 posters with me. Problem to get. I clear everything. I never ambush anybody with anything. And I don't do that. That's not just with getting some of my poster collection autographed. That's with anything. One thing I get asked a lot from people is, why do I get the kind of access I do to so many people, and why do I get to travel with them and do specials and all that kind of stuff? And honestly, I think it's very simple. You show up on time all the time. I don't drink or do drugs. I don't get wasted. I treat everybody with respect. And you should just do that anyway in life.
Yeah.
But certainly if you're going to represent yourself at a rock and roll show, everybody's important. Everybody has something to do with the night going well for the kids who come out for the show. So it doesn't matter if it's the lead singer of the headlining band, doesn't matter if it's somebody working behind the bar, or if they're sweeping up the floor, or if they're the tour manager. It doesn't matter who it is. Treat everybody with respect. And also remember that everybody has a story. Everybody has their own life. Everybody has interesting stuff to tell. That's why wherever I travel, I talk to everybody I can. I talk literally. If I'm sitting next to somebody in an airport, I'll try and get them talking to find out where they're from. What do they do for a living? Because I'm going to learn from that. And you just never know where knowledge is going to come in handy, be it professionally, whether you're talking to an artist who's new and they tell you they're from someplace, and 3 months before that you met somebody in an airport from there, and you know a little background, so you've got a little something more to talk about. You just never know when a little bit of knowledge is going to come in handy. Mm-hmm. And the best part is, being nice to everybody, it doesn't cost you a fucking thing.
Exactly.
And a lot of people appreciate it. In this day and age where everybody can be kind of short-tempered, if you turn out to be that super cool person they meet every day, or that person who made them laugh while you're in line at Starbucks, or, if I go to do a festival and somebody's doing 8 interviews, mine's going to be the fucking best.
Yeah.
I want it to be the best. I want it to be the best informed. I want them to laugh a little bit. I want them to feel that they were treated with respect and intelligence. And, that's how I approach anything that I do. So.
Yeah, that's like when I do my show, I like to have a little bit of fun with it. I want to pick their brains. I want to talk about what they are working on. I don't want to know about what's going on social media with them, all things like that. I want to know about them and the band. You know what I'm saying? And be fun with it and be respectful.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, and I, just some stuff. Like, I don't ask about ex-girl. Like, some people love gotcha questions.
Sure.
And I'm like, what the fuck would you do that to somebody for? Like, don't be an asshole.
Right.
Now if something is a viable story, or something was woven into a song, then it's game. And there's a good, there's a right way and a wrong way. I shouldn't say that, but there's sometimes a better way to approach difficult subject matter when you speak to somebody. You can allude to the subject without throwing it in their faces, and if they bite. And the person is going to know what's going on. They're going to know what you're alluding to. And if they choose to pick up the thread, then they can. If they deftly avoid it or move on to something else, then you kind of have your answer.
Yeah.
If something is super important and it is newsworthy, yeah. But just talking to people about their personal lives or trying to embarrass them, I'm not a dick, At least I try not to be. I'm sure plenty of people would argue the fact, but, for the most part, I try not to be a dick. So
just ask before the interview or something other. If they tell you no, then scratch it off and move on. That's what I normally do.
Fair enough. Yeah. Or in some cases, if there's something personal I want to ask, if it's somebody that I've known for a long time,
right,
I'll ask before I take out a recorder, before I take out a camera, before anything else. I'll talk about that kind of stuff, and that happens again. Because, so many of these artists I've had relationships with for decades, you meet their families eventually, or they meet my family, or, you travel together and stuff happens and, you just you want to make sure they're okay. But that's not the kind of thing that you want on the air or they want on the air. So, you keep it off. Again, I'm not judging anybody else. I know some people love to ask gotcha stuff, or they love to set up somebody and get a laugh at their expense. And if that's what they do, that's what they do. But for me, that's not my thing,
What made you want to get into the music industry, or was it just one of those things, Lou, that just happened?
A bit of both. Again, I mentioned before, I grew up in a little town called Englishtown, New Jersey. And it was the middle of nowhere when I was a kid, but we were an hour from New York, and it was an hour to Philadelphia, and it was 30 minutes to the Jersey Shore beaches like Manasquan or Asbury Park. So there was radio from all over the place. And it was some of the, because you're talking the New York and Philadelphia markets, the top talent in the country were everywhere. You just spin through the radio dial. There were great radio stations of all kinds. Particularly when I was a kid, there were a lot more rock stations on the air. So I could listen to, when I was a kid, I would listen to WABC AM 77 WABC, and they had great DJs like Harry Harrison, Ron Lundy, and the afternoon guy, who still, for my money, is the greatest DJ ever in history, who passed away just a little over a year ago. The anniversary of his death was just a week or so ago. His name was Dan Ingram, and he was just brilliant. And then as I got a little older and started listening to rock, there were all the rock stations to listen to, like, Scott Muni at WNEW-FM 102.7, where rock lives. And there was WPLJ in New York, and out of Philly there was WMMR and WYSP and WIOQ. And there were the Jersey rock stations like WDHA, which is still there, which is still on the air. So there were all these great radio things, and I worship these DJs. I listen to the radio constantly, morning, noon, and night. I fell asleep with the radio on. I woke up, the radio was still on, and I thought, that's a pretty cool way to make a living. And then when I started to go to concerts, I knew I had no aptitude to play music. I've got no fucking talent whatsoever. So I did notice that the other people up on stage were the radio DJs who would come out and, introduce the band. And I thought, well, I can do that, And so I got involved at my college radio station, which was the Brookdale Community College station. And, well, actually, even before that, I was doing the PA announcements in my high school. That was like my start. And, but I gave it a good radio delivery. I'm sure there might be tapes of it someplace. God, I hope they never turn up. And then I sort of looked into the internship at WMMR while I was working at my college station, and interned for a year. Eventually had to leave because corporate said, kids have been working here for a year, you haven't paid them, you can sue us. And then I ran into somebody from the radio station about 6 months later, and I looked into an entry-level position and rolled the rest of my career out of that. It was just all blind luck. And a lot of hours in work, I mean, I'm a firm believer in the harder you work, the luckier you will get, because it just, puts you in better places to get lucky, I suppose. So, but yeah, my only other work qualification is that I memorized album liner notes. So, the only way I could make a living knowing all that useless shit was on the radio. So that's what pointed me in the direction I went.
Working with your good buddy Alan McBain on doing some original illustration for each chapter, what did you want to do for it? Did he bounce ideas off of you? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, first a bit of history with Alan. Now, I met Alan originally back in the 1980s, and I met Alan through a guy named Chuck Ash. And Chuck, when I met him, he was a Pennsylvania state trooper who was also the mayor of his hometown, Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. But he also was working at the time as Frank Zappa's bodyguard, because Frank had a lot of death threats, and he needed a law enforcement person who could carry firearms on, airplanes and on his person. And he traveled with Frank, and it was through Chuck that I met Alan. He and Alan were best friends and would go to concerts together. And Alan, I saw some of his art. I thought, this is great. And I stayed in touch with him. And then when I started doing my own thing in radio, I thought, I could use some graphic arts for this. And Alan started doing stuff for me. And since then, we've worked on hundreds of things together. He's done album covers for one of my bands, Dead Schembecklers. We've done coloring books together, including one I did for my dog last year, Darla the Wonder Dog's Yorkie Submarine, which is, you can download it for free from my website. It's loubrutus.com. The artwork is based on the Beatles' Yellow Submarine, but it's all about my dog fighting evil blue kitties. Very trippy. If you drop acid, I'm sure it's a lot of fun. But we've worked on that. And so when it came time to do the book, I'm talking to the publisher, and I said, we'll probably include pictures. For example, the chapter where our tour bus ran over the guy in the New Jersey Turnpike, Jim Root from Slipknot, and who was also in Stone Sour at the time of this accident, this tour, he was the only one who had in a crazy state of mind, because we all woke up on the bus that we had hit somebody. It was just dawn. And Jim was out in the middle of the turnpike taking pictures. We were blocking the entire southbound turnpike. So the pictures are in, but I also said to the publisher, gee, I'd love an original black and white illustration for each chapter. So I sent the manuscript of the book to Alan, and I told him what was up, and he created from out of this story, from out of each chapter, a preliminary sketch for each chapter. And, there's back and forth that goes on with any illustration, but he did a phenomenal job. So, again, I don't know that anybody illustrates their books much anymore. It's almost like an old-fashioned kind of thing. But I thought it would be cool. And again, because I've worked with Alan so much, and he's done so much artwork for me through the years, and my listeners and anybody who follows me online are very familiar with this stuff. So it just seemed very natural to have him be a part of the book. So, I'm glad to have him in there. So,
was it important for you to put out this book to show everybody a little glimpse of what's taken place over the course of your career with this?
Yeah, it's and there's a lot more stories I could have put in. I just went for the ones that seemed to be easiest to write first. But these are all stories that they've become, like in my circle of friends and in my area of the business, some of these have become rather infamous stories. And it's the type of thing that, after, we're all at the bar after a night, a day at Rock on the Range, everybody is swapping stories. And, I pride myself that I've got some of the fucking crazier stories than anybody could ever tell. So it kind of grew out of that. And a number of friends for and I mean 15, 20 years have been saying, you've got to put it into a book. You got to write a book. You got to do this. And it's one thing to say, oh, yeah, I'll do a book. Oh, boy, that'll be great. But then when you got to sit down and write it, it actually takes time, and you really got to craft it. But I still wanted it to when you read it, I hope you'll hear my voice as if I'm just telling a story. It's just it's written in that respect. So, it was the kind of thing where, I wanted to give other people a glimpse, but mostly I just wanted to set all of these stories that I had told, some of them probably hundreds of times to people. I wanted to set them down to page for my friends more than anything else, you know. And that's why it was, you know, the encouragement of several of my friends like, you know, Corey and Ken and Joe, whom I mentioned earlier in this interview. You know, they were three of the guys who were like, fuck, I want to read this thing, finish writing it, you know. So, yeah.
What do you hope everyone takes away from this book once they start to read into this and dive into it, man? What do you hope they take away from it? What do you hope they get from it?
You know, mostly I hope they just have a laugh and enjoy it. But I think if they take anything away from it, it really does, I think, it gives you an idea of what happens behind the scenes in all this, both on the radio and in the concert industry. And again, I'm not telling horrible stories about anybody, but there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes from a lot of people. And I think it's interesting to learn about, particularly if you're a big music geek like myself. I mean, I just love knowing what's going on behind the scenes. So if there was a takeaway other than, you know, sheer enjoyment from it, I would hope it people get a bit of a bit more understanding about how the whole rock and roll machine works.
Now, you've done all kinds of things: photographer, collector, rock historian, radio DJ. What do you prefer the most, Lou? What absolutely for you is the best thing you like doing?
You know, whatever I'm doing at that moment, I think. When I'm interviewing somebody for the air, well, first of all, just being on the radio is fun. It's fun making that connection with people. There's nothing quite like it. So that's great. When you get to sit with an artist, somebody who's really interesting or somebody you have a really good rapport with or somebody who makes you laugh or you make them laugh, that's a great feeling, you know, because you're learning about somebody else. You're learning about how a creative person ticks. You're educating other people about them. I mean, that's a great feeling. But then, you know, I love doing photography. You know, like last night I shot Godsmack. Over the weekend I shot, Rob Zombie, Marilyn Manson, I Prevail, like dozens of different bands. I fucking love doing pictures. I only think now, after a solid 20, maybe 22 years of really working hard at it, I think I'm finally starting to get some decent images. Like, I always took okay pictures, you know, because most people, you know, you get decent equipment, you should be able to get pretty decent images. But it's only really the last couple of years where I can look at the pictures and think that they're okay. Because I look at stuff even from 4 years ago and I think, oh, it's not nearly as good as I could be or should be. But that's the nature of anything. I think you just always want to improve and you always want to get better, particularly with photography, because the longer you do it, the more you learn, the more you can refine your techniques. And, you know, you just know the cameras better, you know light better. It still doesn't mean you're always going to get great pictures or even good ones. You know, sometimes I go into a show and it just, you know, you get okay images, but, you know, there's nothing great. So you just keep going back and trying. The thing about photography is no matter how much you spend, there will always be better shit that's going to come out tomorrow and you're going to want it.
Sure.
It's a cruel, cruel hobby and profession.
Just like computers.
But one thing I found for me is, yeah, exactly like computers. Yeah, it's the exact same thing. One thing I found for me is, as social media has exploded, having the ability to provide a steady stream of original images is good. Now, first of all, I love doing the images. And if it were only that would be great. But the fact that it means, you know, my Facebook feed, my Twitter feed, my Instagram feed are filled with, you know, hopefully awesome images of rock stars on stage, backstage. I'm traveling with them on the bus. You know, there's just all this stuff that 99.99999% of the world are never going to be able to get. You know, that's a great way to feed the social media model. Because I don't talk about politics and I don't talk or religion or any of that shit. I kind of figure when people come to my feeds, they're looking for music-related stuff and maybe a break from the rest of the wicked world, which is not to say I don't have an interest in the wicked world and what's happening. And, I'll address that stuff when I feel a real need to. But for the most part, people come to me for music-related stuff or entertainment-related stuff. So I try and keep it there. So, but people can judge for themselves. It's at Lou Brutus on Instagram, at Lou Brutus on Twitter, and Lou Brutus Rocks is my public page on Facebook. And because now we're in the middle of the summer concert season, like there's tons of images I'm putting up, because it takes me a while. Sometimes I'll go to a festival and I'll shoot 5,000 or 10,000 pictures that all have to be gone through to find the good ones. Then they have to be processed. So sometimes that can take me weeks or months, or sometimes like a year later, I'm like, hey, I never finished all those pictures from, Rockstar Mayhem. And oh boy, there's 800 pictures of Hailstorm. Well, let's find some good ones, so.
You've been in the music industry for over 23 years. Did you ever expect it to last this long and take you as far as it has, man?
I had no expectations. I have no expectations now. It could all end tonight for all I know, but it's all I wanted to do. It's all I wanted to be around. And I work hard every day, 7 days a week. I just do the best I can. And, you hope for good breaks and for some luck. And, you just get up every morning and do it again. And try and make it happen. There's no master plan. There's no expectation. There's no anything. There's just whatever the next project is. You just get up and do it. It's complicated, but it's not complicated. You just fucking get up and do your best every day. So for me, that means drinking a lot of black coffee and listening to loud music. It helps propel one forward.
Is there a show or a specific moment for you, Lou, that sticks out above and beyond the rest, possibly? I mean, I know you've got some great, great moments, but is there just that one thing possibly?
There's a bunch of stuff. I was doing I was doing some questions with Paul McCartney once, and the first question was it was like a songwriting question, and I set it up pretty open-ended to hopefully get a good answer out of him. And he gave me like a 7 or an 8 minute answer. And during it, I'm sure he was giving me really interesting stuff, but the entire time, and he's sitting at a grand piano and I'm standing there with the microphone. The only thing I could think of was, holy shit, Paul McCartney is talking to me. Paul McCartney is he's looking at me right now. Paul, like this all I could. And then he's going on, and again, he's you hear that everywhere was a great song, Revolver, blah, 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 whatever he's talking about. And I was standing there like the dumbest asshole in the world, gape-mouthed, like a slack-jawed yokel. But, yeah, that was a pretty cool moment. For concerts, the first things that always come to mind are the sort of the big event shows, one of which, and it really was just musically really impressive, was the Freddie Mercury tribute show at Wembley Stadium in London. Now, this was the year after Freddie Mercury had died of AIDS, and the remaining Queen guys wanted to do a nice show to remember him by and also raise money for his AIDS Foundation. So I flew off to London to cover this and interviewed in the couple of days prior to the show the bands who were playing it. So, I interviewed Metallica and Def Leppard and Extreme and all of these other musicians. And then the day of the show, Metallica opened and they did a short set, and Def Leppard did a short set, and a number of different bands did sets. Then the second half of the night was even better, because there you had the remaining members of Queen come out, and they started trooping out different vocalists who, of course, were going to sing Freddie's part. So James Hetfield did Stone Cold Crazy, and, Axl Rose came out and did a duet on, I think it was Bohemian Rhapsody with Elton John.
Yeah, he did.
David Bowie came out with Annie Lennox of the Eurythmics, and they did Under Pressure.
Yep.
David also stayed out there. He had, of course, written the first big hit for Mott the Hoople, All the Young Dudes. They had a mini Mott the Hoople reunion, so it was Queen, Mott the Hoople, David Bowie doing All the Young Dudes. Like, it was just, and this is a tribute to Freddie Mercury, like the most beloved guy in England. So there's whatever, 85,000, 100,000 people there crying their eyes out the whole time. It was just really something else. And again, I've been to Live Aid. I've been to Live Earth. I was to Live 8. I've been to these things all over the world. And I'm just talking like the big event shows, or Roger Waters doing the wall at the Berlin Wall. Like, I was there for that. I went to the rehearsals. Those are all pretty great. But man, that Freddie Mercury thing, that was really something else. I think maybe because of the extra emotional weight, and also the incredible performances. Some of it was just like, you hear terms like breathtaking.
Yes.
And it probably doesn't mean much anymore, but some of the performances literally just took your breath away, just sucked the air out of the stadium. It was just something else. So
what got me about Queen, and I want to go back here and talk to you about the Paul McCartney thing, because I think that's hilarious. I'm glad you got to do that. That's awesome. But I saw a video of fans, this crowd singing Bohemian Rhapsody. The whole crowd just starts fucking singing it. The break, when another band was getting ready to come on stage.
Yeah.
And it sent
goosebumps
all over me. I was like, oh my God.
It was really something else. And they loved him so much over there. And it was also, it was really strange. The morning of the concert, Britain learned that Benny Hill, whom I don't know if there's a Benny Hill TV show. It ran here in the States. It was ginormous over in England. Benny Hill was like the most beloved guy on television in England. And the news of him dying the morning of the Freddie Mercury show, it was really very, very, I wouldn't even know how to compare those two over here in America. But for those things to sort of hook up the way they did, it really added even more emotional weight to what was going on. So, and one other set I should mention from that day, I mentioned Extreme played. Now, Extreme, they kind of get lumped in with the 80s hair metal bands. They were so much more talented than that. Probably their biggest hit was an acoustic ballad called More Than Words.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Now, when it came time for them to play their set, they were going to do like a 20-minute set at this Freddie Mercury thing. Brian May, the Queen guitarist, was a huge, I suppose still is, huge fan of Extreme. So he introduced them and said, more so than any other band on the stage today, this group understands what Queen was all about. And if you listen closely to the tapes of the broadcast, you can hear the Extreme guys react to it just off mic going, holy shit, what did he just say? But instead of playing their own songs, and that's what the other bands did, and they did great. Metallica opened with like Enter Sandman, Def Leppard did some of their big hits, all the other bands did their hits. Extreme did a 15-minute medley of Queen songs, and they fucking killed it. And the audience went crazy. Like, these people were just going batshit. And they were all doing that tunk, tunk, tunk with their hands and stuff that Freddie had taught the Wembley crowds how to do. And that was nuts. And then they did that electrically. Then the rhythm section of Extreme left, and it was just the singer, Gary Cherone, and the guitar player, Nuno Betancourt. They sat down on the edge of the stage with an acoustic guitar, and they did, and it's one of my favorite Queen songs. It's from A Night at the Opera. It's a song called Love of My Life, which Freddie would often have the crowd sing back to him. So they start doing Love of My Life, and the people are singing, they're crying, and then towards the end of Love of My Life, they medleyed it into the only Extreme song they did More Than Words.
Oh, I see.
So they culminate this performance with this song, and of course, everybody starts crying harder and singing this song because it was, of course, a ginormous hit over in England. That was maybe one of the actually not maybe, it was one of the best sets I've ever seen a band play. And again, I've seen damn near everybody, and that 20 minutes that Extreme did should be taught about in the College of Rock and Roll Knowledge, because it was just some crazy, well played, well thought out stuff.
Not to take away from the Queen story, that's fucking awesome, man. That's really awesome. But I want to jump back to the Paul McCartney, because you said you're standing there interviewing him with your mouth wide open, and I'm thinking, I'm thinking of the Chris Farley skit on Saturday Night Live. Of Chris Farley.
That was really that was one of my favorite Chris Farley things. You know. Oh, and the Beatles. Yeah. And McCartney can barely hold it together for that thing. He's just ready to piss his pants. He's laughing so hard. Chris Farley, when I worked in Chicago, he lived in the building I worked in.
Really?
I was working for Rock 103.5 WRCX in Chicago, which is a great radio station. Chris Farley, we were on the 40th floor of the John Hancock building, and Farley lived up in top of the building, one of the top floors, and he would sometimes pop by the radio station, and he'd listen to the station, and he'd stick his head in my office sometimes. Brutus, let's go out, and he, sadly, I think he was usually pretty wired. There were rumors about how he got wired and all that, and I didn't want to be around that, so I never took him up on the drinking offers. Also, he was a legendary drinker, and I didn't want to wake up 2 days later naked, drunk, broke, and sticky 5 states away going, what the fuck happened? Yeah. Which was probably a distinct possibility. And he was a really funny guy, really nice. I thought it was a tragedy what happened to him, because I think he should still be around making people laugh. He had a gift, and people loved him. You know, it was just sad. But you know, that's one of the things too. When I travel, like, you know, I'll interview people for the show, and again, you see and hear stuff, or you look at somebody's pupils and they're as big as eggs. You know, what people do is their business. But I always try, when I travel with bands, if I'm going to get on the bus or I'm going to get on the plane with them, I prefer people who aren't crazy, you know, because, again, what they do is their own business. I'd rather not be around it, you know. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking in terms of, like, you know, powder drugs and stuff like that. I know. You know, again, I'm not judging. But I don't do that stuff, and I prefer not to be around it. Particularly traveling interstate, you know. Is this yours? No, trooper, it's not, you know. So does that make sense, the way I described it?
That's perfectly fine. Perfectly fine.
Okay. All right, good.
Everybody, we want to pre-order Lou's book. It's a Memoir Sonic Warrior My Life as a Rock and Roll Reprobate. That's coming out on Rare Bird Books in the spring of 2020. You want to get out and pre-order this now?
And you can pre-order it now, rarebirdbooks.com. Again, you can pre-order through Target or Amazon, but rarebirdbooks.com is where you're going to get autographed first editions. You can also go to my website, which is loubrutus.com. You can link to the book sale there. Also, one other thing I want to mention, on my website there, let me punch it up right now so I know what the fuck I'm talking about. If you go to the About section, and that's just all career information and bio information, there's a section in that called The List. And if you punch up The List, it's a listing of every band I've ever seen live. And the ones that are written in bold are ones I've interviewed. And I don't know for sure that anybody else on the planet has ever seen as many bands as I've seen and interviewed them, but I put my list up against anybody else, anybody on this whole planet. So again, loubrutus.com for the most stuff, but go to the list section and check it out. And it's not even complete. I haven't, I'm still finding bands that I forgot to list, or there's a bunch of bands that I just saw at Rockfest for the first time that I'm going to have to add in there. So that's all there. And of course, I've got verified accounts on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and would be great for people to follow along. But thank you very, very much. This is the very first press of any kind I've done for the book, and I really appreciate the opportunity. And let's do some more when the book comes out. When you get a chance to check it out, we'll make sure that you get an early copy.
Yeah.
Let's do some more and let's talk some more.
Yeah, hell yeah. Before I let you go, good sir, would you care to do a promo for the show?
Oh, I'd be happy to. Hello, this is your friend and humble narrator, rock and roll radio raconteur Lou Brutus, and you are listening to BODS Mayhem Hour. May the rock gods have mercy on your dark, dark soul.
Everybody stick around. We got some great stuff coming up, and you only hear these interviews right here on BODS Mayhem Hour and BODS Mayhem Radio Network. Get out and check out our Facebook page. It has our podcast link, YouTube links in soon, our Twitch link, and also get out and like our YouTube channel. Everything BODS Mayhem Hour is going to be on our YouTube channel. Please like us, subscribe to us, and plus our podcast link as well. And get out and check out Lou's new book that's coming out in spring of 2020.
Buy my fucking book. Buy my fucking book. Sorry.
No.
Hashtag buy my fucking book.
Lou, thank you so much for doing this interview, man. And like I said, you've been a huge inspiration on me for getting out and start doing interviews and things. So I appreciate that.
Oh, don't blame me. Don't blame me for getting you involved in this crap. Oh no.
Folks, stick around. We got some good stuff coming up. Thanks, Lou.
You're listening to BODS Mayhem Hour.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.